everybody, welcome to the channel. My name is Taylor and this is the Dissection, where we surgically disassemble your favorite horror movies and also puns. We do puns. Salem's Lot is a classic movie, well, actually it's a miniseries, from legendary Texas Chainsaw Massacre director Tobe Hooper. And the fact that it's a made-for-TV miniseries didn't stop it from becoming a vampire flick with a cult following. With a remake in the works, or depending on when we get around to releasing this video, is announced and has a release date, if that's the case, then Ethan will add the date down there in text. Thanks, Ethan. We figured this was a good movie to start the series off with. A classic tale of romance with enough spooks and scares for a totally PG rating. But don't let that deter you from enjoying this movie, because although there isn't a single on-screen kill, it's still technically a Tobe Hooper film and should be viewed as such. So with that said, let's dive in and dissect Salem's Lot. I'm gonna be honest with you, this movie scared the absolute piss out of me when I was a kid. Keep in mind that this has a PG rating, and yes, while the PG-13 rating had not yet been implemented, I still think you're going to be hard-pressed to find a movie as scary as this without an R rating. I was introduced to Salem's Lot by my father, who was equally scared of it when he was a child. Scaring your kids on purpose was a very normal thing in the 80s, by the way. And it's one of those movies that has just sort of stuck with me for a long time. We start with the movie foreshadowing of things to come as Ben and his young companion Mark, played by Lance Kerwin, are filling flasks with holy water in a church somewhere in Mexico and exclaiming, "They found us, and we have to go further," implying that they are on the run from something that is susceptible to holy water. I'm guessing vampires or IRS agents. It might be IRS agents. I mean, I don't know if you've ever had to run from IRS agents, but they're pretty persistent. Almost as persistent as the "your car's extended warranty is about to expire" people. And since we know that this movie takes place in Maine because, well, Stephen King, their presence in Mexico means that they have been running a long, long way from home. In reflection on this opening, it actually sets the stage for what will be a very slow burn. And I know that this is technically a TV series, so we have a completely different curve to judge this movie on, but I, for one, really hope that when the new Salem's Lot remake is finally released, we can set up the movie with some of the same pacing that the It remake had, because this was so much of a better setup. We flashback via a title card featuring the house from the Salem's Lot iconic imagery, which is actually a huge focal point of this film. You could actually say that the house and not Barlow or Straker is the real villain, but I'm getting ahead of myself. We find Ben returning to the sleepy town of Salem's Lot in order to write a book because, again, Stephen King. Ben is haunted by his memories of an experience he had in this house as a boy and comes to find out that it has recently been purchased by a Mr. Straker, played by James Mason, who is just so goddamn sinister.
Good evening.
I mean, look at how menacing he is with this cane and black suit. This character is the epitome of the person your parents warn you about when they tell you to never take candy from a stranger. Ben practically stumbles upon a woman, Susan, laying on a grassy path, drawing, with her shit just kind of sprawled out everywhere. Like, is this a public trail? I mean, are there any hikers here? How rude is this? Anyways, we find out that Susan is as dense as a bag of rocks, and Ben gives her some metaphor about a book's spine, which I guess this is flirting before sending girls unsolicited pictures of your junk became a thing.
See you tomorrow. And tomorrow night.
Cut to some marital infidelity, and are you surprised? I feel like the opening shots of this movie are just setting up the characters that you know are gonna get murked as soon as some freaking vampires show up. The sheriff and the local drunk are both snooping on the couple as they leave their place of work, at which point the officer enlists the local drunk, Weasel, go figure, to spy on the new writer in town. Fine police work indeed. I wonder if Weasel is on payroll. No. Oh yeah, remember that adulterous affair that was hinted at earlier? Well, now we are introduced to the couch-sitting cucklord himself, who just happens to be the delivery driver of the company owned by the dude his wife is shebanging while he's out making night deliveries. We see that things are progressing pretty quickly between Ben and Susan, and she is already introducing him to her parents, or maybe that's just the way things work in a small town like this. I'm pretty sure we aren't that far removed from Ben convincing Susan's father to let him marry his daughter by gifting him his finest goat. But whatever the case, one thing you've got to love about these older movies is jokes like this.
Well, his latest one, it's about two men.
Not one of those.
Not that there's anything wrong with that.
No.
Weasel is already fast at work spying on the new writer by going through his first draft of his book, where we learn that Ben is in fact writing about the Marston house. Shocker, I know. More character development with Ben and Susan, in which you find out for a second time, in case the last scene didn't spell it out clearly enough, that Ben is writing about the Marston house. Susan suggests that they go to the lake for some late night, well, you know what kids go to the lake for in horror movies. And then we cut back to Ben typing and staring at the Marston house. There's more sexual tension between Ben and the Marston house than between him and Susan. He sees Straker leaving his house in the same clothes he was wearing the night before, so homeboy must clearly have a closet full of black supervillain suits.
That's very good of you to come over, Mr. Crockett, I need your help again.
Next, we get one of the most detailed set of super sus instructions from ultra-villain Straker, who tells local crooked land dealer / moving company owner and winner of the ugliest suit award, Mr. Crockett, who's played by Fred Willard, and let's be real, this has to be the film that landed him the role of Ed Harkin in Anchorman. Right? I mean, just look at that suit. This suit looks like the kind of guy who would sell you a used car with a dead hooker in the trunk would wear.
I've never seen so many dead hookers in all my life.
Anyway, Straker tells Crockett to pick up a precarious package and deliver it to his unattended house's cellar while also making sure to padlock every conceivable exit from the cellar, which doesn't seem suspicious at all. And that kid we saw in the opening? Turns out he's an actor. No, not just in this movie, but in a play that's in this movie. That's cute. Mike the caretaker is laying out flowers on grave sites. Psst, you're gonna need a lot more of those, Mike. And is propositioned by Cully the cuck. You see what I did there? To cover his night shift, freeing up Cully to pursue other plans, quote unquote. See, I told you that short scene from earlier would come back up, and all the while there's a dog barking incessantly in the background. Not much unlike my neighbor's dog, who's a total asshole. And if one love triangle wasn't enough, Ben tries to walk Susan home, who's being stalked by her current or ex-boyfriend, Ned Tebbets. He's a little bit of both. Susan confronts him, and I'm gonna be honest here, I really feel for this guy. I mean, she tells him she loves him and by her own admission is involved at least partially in a relationship with him, but never tells the poor guy. I mean, you probably shouldn't be following her around, Ned, but I get why you're confused.
You stay away from her, yeah?
Back at the office, Cully is being pretty obvious that he knows about his wife's affair in front of his boss, and here comes Constable Parkins to give us a bit of exposition. Don't you love how he does that? We learn, if it wasn't already clear, that the truck is headed to Portland to pick up a shipment.
A lot of old junk from Europe, I guess.
And that's Portland, Maine, not Portland, Oregon. This is a vampire movie, not a documentary about a feminist vegan hipster food co-op. Oh, wait a second, Cully isn't going to Portland after all. He's gonna stay behind because
he wants Boom Boom Bonnie to think he's going to Portland.
Remember that barking dog from earlier? Someone finally got tired of its shit. Why does Stephen King hate family pets so much? Mike and Ned pick up the old junk from Portland, which seems to be emanating cold air, in possibly one of my favorite scenes from a King adaptation.
That thing is moving.
They drive the mystery crate back to the Straker Barlow residence, aka the Marston house. Meanwhile, Bonnie invites her boss over to get fresh. Unbeknownst to her, Cully the cuck is standing by, watching her through the window and going through a six-pack like the cure for balding is aluminum. His kid Mark has a massive bedroom. His parents must be lawyers. You ever eat at a restaurant with an old person and they take out their teeth and put them on their bread plate? I know this scene is supposed to give more exposition and build Ben's character, but that's all I can think about when I watch it. The Glick kids walk home in the dark, and even though their parents probably told them not to take candy from strangers, they still get nabbed. You know, one of the creepiest things about this movie might be Straker's "hand over the purse, lady" kill costume. The thought of that guy in a beanie face mask gives me the heebie-jeebies. Mike and Ned offload the old junk and fail to follow any of the very, very specific instructions Straker had laid out. I mean, he was pretty detailed. I wonder if there was a reason he was so specific. Also, Ned must have worked at FedEx before he was a plumber.
Close the doors!
Cully waits patiently outside for his boss to arrive and put the boom boom to Boom Boom Bonnie just as Henry stumbles home. It's unclear what happened to Henry, but it looked like he fell in the mud.
Hey, I'm going.
Wait! Danny, wait!
Maybe he's coming down with malaria. Straker realizes the cold old junk isn't locked up like he instructed, and call me crazy, but Straker might be abducting kids to feed whatever broke out of that crate. Cully storms in on his wife's affair and pulls the old "my shotgun's not loaded" scare on Larry, which causes Larry to pee his pants and leave in a panic. And also his underwear, right before he gets murked by what is the first vampire kill in this whole movie, we assume, and we are already over an hour in. Talk about a slow burn. How did the vampire drive Larry's dead body up to the lake? I mean, we have to assume that in order to drive Larry's dead body in his car, it would take two people, meaning the vampire had to drive one of the cars, right? The pace is really picking up as we see one of the most iconic and nightmare-inducing scenes from this movie, in which Danny Glick beckons his older brother to the window to let him in. I still to this day feel like every time I look out my window into the dark night, I'm going to see a creepy little vampire boy scratching at it. Look, a clue. Gee, who always wears black? Couldn't be that lovely old man that bought the murder house, could it? Constable Parkins thinks so and interrogates him, and if you pay attention to this conversation, you might get the vibe that Straker and Barlow are kind of a couple? I mean, I'm not saying it's impossible for two straight men to live together and own an antique business, but I think that these guys are about as straight as Bert and Ernie.
Not that there's anything wrong with that.
We find out from Susan's father, the town doctor, as he casually tells Ben, "Hi, malpractice much?" that Larry died of an apparent heart attack, even though, vampire. I mean, I guess we don't know exactly how long he was in that crate, but wouldn't you think Barlow would be hungry? Maybe vampires can't eat blood after someone's heart is stopped, in which case, how often do you think that this happens? It's gotta be tough not giving people a heart attack when your face looks like this. Maybe he should borrow Straker's murder beanie next time. Apparently, Ralphie Glick didn't finish the job as he has to go to the hospital to vampire his brother. And they cut right at the good part. That happens a lot in this movie. Look at this smug ass. He's got that "I just started the vampire apocalypse" look on his face, you know what I mean? By the way, real Chad energy here, backing in with his hand on the back of the passenger seat. Straker brings a very sweaty Constable Parkins his murder clothes, but the look on his face implies that he has one up on Mr. Law. No, I fell down the stairs. When did guys stop carrying their jackets like this? Can we bring this fashion trend back? Susan gets a job interview in Boston and tries to get Ben to go with, but he wants to stay and see Danny Glick's funeral, which is kind of creepy. But hey, he's an author. Don't question his process. Danny Glick's mother faints at the funeral as the doom clouds roll in, and meanwhile, Mike fills in the grave and for whatever reason is compelled to jump in and open Danny Glick's coffin. Surprise! He's vampired as fuck! And also, it was sunny 2 seconds ago. Why is he not burning up? This scene always bothered me. How am I supposed to believe that all these vampires need an invitation to enter a hospital, but they can get a suntan? Who signed off on this? I always found it weird in this movie that the vampires loosely follow vampire tropes, but there's exceptions. Like, they need to be invited in sometimes. And they can apparently go tanning. So there's that. Eva warns Ben that Ned wants to fix his toilet or something. I think she means assault and battery, but it's hard to tell what she's talking about. This kid is super fucking weird.
Hey, wants to tie me up?
Constable Parkins thinks Ben is in cahoots with Straker and Barlow.
There's a connection.
That's some real solid detective work, Constable. Mike crashes the dinner party and gives us exposition on his being vampired. Apparently, the secondary vampires take 2 tries to vampire people. And by now, everyone is getting vampired, including Mark, but oh, wait a minute. Not today, Satan! Mike gets examined by the old man, named Jason by the way, who notices the vampire marks on his neck and that the room's window is now mysteriously open. That's not weird or anything. That book is gonna take forever to write if you type like that. Later, Jason calls Mike at 4 a.m., rude, and asks him to bring a cross over to his house. Mike appears to be dead, and that damn window is open again. Ben tells Jason that he probably shouldn't go around saying that Mike is a vampire, even though he is, because he might lose his job teaching kids if the whole town thinks he's crazy. Glad to know what the priorities are here. So they just decide to leave it up to the doctors to find out that there are vampires vampiring people all over the town. So real quick, because it's come up multiple times, it's been mentioned that people in this town are Lutheran and not Catholic. Lutherans are a branch of Protestants that broke off from the Catholic Church during the Reformation of the 16th century. We know that crosses will kill the vampires, and even though Lutherans traditionally used crosses, by the early 18th century, it fell out of use until the renewal in the 1950s and 60s. So even though by 1979, when this movie was made, they were in use, they had not been for so long that many people associated Lutherans as Christians who don't use crosses. So if you're wondering why they keep bringing the Lutheran thing up, there you go. Creepy old guy Straker finally got all of that old junk opened up. Looks expensive. I wonder if he has a rug that would help me tie the room together. Ben finally meets Mr. Straker and has this awkward interaction.
You'll enjoy Mr. Barlow. And he'll enjoy you.
And I can't tell if Straker is threatening Ben or hitting on him. I don't think Ben can tell either. Surprise, bitch! Ben wakes up in the hospital and is notified that Ned was arrested. Doc also lets Ben know that he low-key thinks he's crazy but agrees to get him a crucifix. That'll probably come in handy later. Meanwhile, Jason is just freaking himself out with vampire and werewolf lore when he hears creaking upstairs. He investigates in what might be one of the most creepy and memorable scares of the whole movie as we see Mike is back from the dead and already in the house. Good thing Jason brought his crucifix to resend his invitation and force Mike out the window, but unfortunately, crucifixes won't stop a heart attack. Especially if you're holding it upside down, Jason! That's also the second time a vampire heart attacks someone in this movie. You gotta figure vampires are heart attacking at least 2 out of 5 of their victims. Someone is leaving a lot of money on the table by not marketing those goofy glasses that have the nose and the mustache to vampires. Just saying. Ned gets vampired in prison, and goddamn, that is a scary looking vampire. The vampire look of Barlow was actually a creative choice by this film's production team, instead of having a vampire that looked like your average dude, like in the Rob Lowe remake. And I gotta say, I think it was a good choice. And Danny's mother has clearly been vampired as well. Ben puts it together that the vampires are breeding, and the doctor says that Ned's body has disappeared from the morgue, and oh, something else.
And the baby that died this morning is gone.
Great, now we have a vampire baby on the loose. Father Callahan tries to mediate a family discussion with the Petrie family about Mark's bad dream, aka Danny Glick trying to vampire him, and Papa Petrie is not happy and has been passively aggressively making fun of his son's obsession with horror toys the whole movie. when all of a sudden, look out, motherfucker! Barlow cannonballs in through the window like he's Michael Phelps after a few doobies. Straker just uses the front door. There's more religious context here as Straker convinces the priest to put his religious faith to the test and trade his crucifix for Mark's life. And in all seriousness, this scene is pretty impactful. I mean, you have the murder of Mark's parents, the makeup on this freak show, I mean, look at it. And Mark vowing to avenge his parents' death, which I've always found hard to take seriously with that haircut. I mean, seriously, he looks like a young Patty Pimblett. Don't hurt me, Patty. Wait, what the fuck? If he could do that the whole time, why did we even go through that whole proposition? Ben makes a cross out of popsicle sticks, which is never gonna work, right? He's with Danny's supposedly dead mother. Oh shit, she's not dead. Bill! You've gotta grab a steak or some holy water or, oh, I guess the popsicle sticks work too. Kind of takes the wind out of Dracula's sails, if you know what I mean. Also, look at Dr. Norn's response here. He looks like he just gave an irritable bowel syndrome diagnosis, not witnessed a creature of the undead dissolve into fog machine smoke. Lucky for Salem's Lot, Ben just happens to have a friend who's turned on by the occult. Wait a second, that's a typo. Turned on to the occult, in San Francisco of all places. Damn hippies. This friend relayed a lot of useful information, like they need to find Barlow's coffin during the day and put a stake through his heart. You know, I don't think you need an occult card-carrying savant to tell you that if you're going to hunt a vampire and kill it in its coffin, that you should probably do it during the day, because that's when they are in their coffins. But you know, it was the 70s. Groovy. Ben tells Susan to leave town, but I feel like she's not going to listen. Hey, wait a second. Where's Gillespie and who's this vampired bozo in his chair? Susan goes to check on Ava, who is totally vampired instead of leaving town like Ben told her to. What is it with the people in Salem's Lot not following instructions? Cut to Susan completely disregarding any warning about vampires and driving to the Marston house. Like, why, Susan? Lucky for Mark, she's there though because she sees him sneaking in through the cellar door and follows him. These doofuses prowl around the boarded up home looking for Nosferatu like there's going to be a neon sign guiding them. Don't stab Susan, you goofy bastard.
What are you doing here? I followed you in.
Good, now that that's established, we can get the fuck out of here, right? No. Turns out Mark is still pretty peeved about Barlow killing his parents. And unfortunately for him, this creepy prick knows the 5-finger death punch. Straker very casually escorts Susan to be vampired and then ties Mark up. Good thing he practiced being tied up with his dad. Wait, that doesn't sound right. Ben finds the constable packing up to leave town like a coward, and I find it funny that of all the things he puts in his overpacked car, the broom and mop and rake had to make it on the docket. And even though he's kind of a piece of shit, he still gives Ben a gun, so that's something. It's like, hey man, I'm gonna get the fuck out of here and let you die, but here's an old pistol I had lying around. So obviously, Mark gets out of the hack rope job because
I can get out of any knot.
Dr. Bill is still wearing a suit. Seriously, I'm kind of worried about this guy. He's acting more like a therapist just going along with Ben's delusions rather than a man going to kill a vampire. I mean, I don't know what the proper vampire killing attire is, but I feel like you probably want something that breathes a little bit more than a 3-piece, you know? The Frog Brothers run into Mark, who, as we addressed earlier,
I can get out of any knot.
and proceed to enter the Marston house, now knowing that Susan is inside somewhere. Foreshadow much? Hey, I thought I told you to kick rocks. Dr. Bill is wandering through the house on his own. I guess the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, and Straker suplexes him into the antler death trap. Ben shoots Barlow, who won't die. He must have a lot of fiber in his diet. And finally, after unloading a full round, Barlow slowly and dramatically passes. Watch your step. They find the door leading to Barlow's tomb and whoops! Hope that wasn't important. For being an ancient vampire with an upscale antique furniture business, Barlow has a pretty vanilla coffin. These two yokels managed to drag Barlow's flimsy coffin into the basement from the root cellar, and wouldn't you know it, the sun has gone down. Makes you wonder why they waited so long to go in after him. Someone must not be a morning person. For some reason, Ben shoves Mark across the room like he just insulted his mother and stakes the ever-loving shit out of Barlow. On a serious note, I love this scene. Barlow writhing in agony while being staked. Meanwhile, the vampire's crawling towards Mark in the background who is totally oblivious. This is just true Toby Hooper gold right here. They proceed to light the house on fire like it's a church in Norway in the 90s, hoping that will take care of the rest of the vampires. But as we know from the prologue, nope. Ben and Mark discuss this, and Ben tells Mark the whole town will burn and it will purify Salem's Lot. Oh fuck, there's werewolves now? We resume the story where it started in Mexico 2 years later. Mark and Ben are clearly still on the run from vampires and stocking up on holy water, even though it's been established in this movie that all you need are popsicle sticks, which seem to be easier to come by, but what do I know? I was born in the 80s after this movie had already made its run on television. Mark and Ben enter a shanty and we find Susan laying in presumably Ben's bed. How she survived the fire is anyone's guess, but she clearly wants to vampire that D. But Ben sees right through it and stakes her ass. They collect their things and move on, and we are left with the final shot of the dark woods, wind in the trees, and a full moon. Because vampires. Alright, if I'm gonna be really honest and critical here of this movie, it did a lot of things right. Even with the restrictions of being a made-for-TV movie with its required cuts for commercial breaks and complete lack of gore and tongue-in-cheek jokes about homosexuality, this movie still manages to pack in a lot of scares. And I think most of that is through the masterwork of Tobe Hooper's direction. He really knows how to compose a shot well and make it unsettling, when to hold on to something suspenseful, and when to cut at the right time, so even though that they aren't technically showing gore, you are for sure imagining it in your head. But the real shining achievement here, in my opinion, was transforming Barlow from an old, boring curmudgeon into a truly iconic horror villain. And I think that says something too. It seems like when masterful directors run with Stephen King's ideas and adapt them to film, the results are something spectacular, even if it's something Stephen King doesn't approve of. Alright friends, if you've enjoyed this video, make sure to let us know by giving it a like, and until next time, stay safe, stay inside, and don't invite any recently deceased loved ones into your house. It may or may not work anyways. We'll see you next time. Bye. The fuck's that sound?
Let me in. Let me in.